They are universal and appealing because of two reasons. One, that they cut across all the nations. There is no nation on the earth which would find these 10 principles unacceptable to them. And the second one is that all these 10 principles of the Global Compact derive their strength and spirit from international covenants. And therefore, these principles are very, very universal, very appealing, and they are followed up by nation states and also by non-state actors, which means businesses, which means civil society, which means academia, which means trade unions, and everybody else. So this is the kind of very broad framework for the Global Compact is. And these four principles, and I'm very happy that the previous speaker did try to refer to the values, which are already contained within the UN Global Compact principles. And these are around four core principles or core values. And UN is all about values, spirit, and how do you really orient yourself towards it. And these are the four value hubs, as I call them up. One is sustainability, which is very, very important and which has become very critical in times to come. And it has already become very critical as of now and is going to become more critical as we kind of proceed into the future. You have anti-corruption and good governance, which is the second major hub that holds those 10 principles of the Global Compact. The third one is human rights, and the fourth one is labor standards. And these are all universal because they derive their strength from the international covenants which are held by the UN Global Compact. As we go ahead, these are the 10 principles which are there, but UN Global Compact also works in support of the broader UN goals. And several initiatives of the Secretary General in the New York City within the UN. And among some of those initiatives of the Secretary General, PRME is one such principle, which Secretary General launched in the year 2007 on the sideline of Global Leaders Summit. We currently have 521 institutions, which are universities and schools, together ensure a climate and a collaboration whereby we can make this 24 to 40 and then 500 and then 1,000 in times to come. So that context is very, very important for us to relate to. The second part of this context is that while we look at any community or the society, we find four very critical elements. And these four critical elements very briefly are as follows. This is the nation state. We also call it the nation state by the nomenclature of the government. In India, we have several layers, but suffice to say that government is a very, very critical element for several reasons. But one of the very critical reasons for government to be one of those critical elements is that it is a custodian of the democratic values that it believes in. And it is also very much important that it reinforces and regulates and facilitates the process for every other element, which I'm going to talk about very briefly. The second very critical element is civil society. Civil society, you will recall, and those of you who do not have really an access to this report, you must kind of refer to this report. This report was done by Johns Hopkins, United Nations, ILO, and United Nations Statistical Division, and this is called as National Satellite Accounting Process. We initiated this process way back in 2006, and the whole process was owned by the Planning Commission and the Ministry of Program Implementation and Statistics. The report says that India has roughly about 4 million civil society, which means very large number. And these 4 million number contribute to about 3% of the total GDP, which is a huge number. And this element is also important because it ups the ante and holds government to account, and therefore very, very critical. We cannot really wish it away. The third one is the private sector, which we sort of try to call as more generically as the businesses, due to very, fine kind of thing that we have in India, where we have PSOs and we have the private sector. Word over, you hardly have this distinction. And therefore, it is come with different kind of a spirit in the mindset, which also means that they make resources available. They have a very unique oversight, both on the government and the businesses. And they also have their own frameworks, which means that if you were to get some money from World Bank, for instance, you have to follow the rule of the game. And therefore, these four elements are very, very important, but I'm going to pick only two for the sake of convenience. Civil society and businesses, and I think if you were to look at the registration laws in India, you'll find that IILM is also the part of the civil society. Because education is one of the elements which gives you the leeway to become a non-profit. And non-profit will probably bring you several advantages in terms of what you want to do and how you want to really do it. And therefore, I will pick up these two and try to focus my thoughts on how can PRME and business entities could probably engage much better in order to deliver the goods which has long been expected, but these things have not really happened. I would like to very quickly ask the audience, how many of you are from the corporate sector? Could you probably show your hands up, please? None. 2, 3. 1, 2, just 1, 2. All right. So this is the problem. And the problem is that we have failed to engage as academic institutions with the private sector or the businesses. And that also reflects in the total number that we have within the PRME, 521 and 24. And the whole state of affairs is that when you go to the companies and talk to them, they will say that, we have certain issues with, with businesses and our own peers and also with the business schools. And the problems are on 3 counts, to be more precise. The first problem is that there is a very, very periodic engagement between the companies and the B schools. And this is across the board. This is across the board, and I'm saying it with a lot of conviction at my command. There has been only periodic interface between, the businesses and the private B schools or universities. So this is something which we need to improve, enhance, and ensure that this kind of gets scaled up. And unless this happens, a very good interface between academia and the businesses is going to really remain where they are. The second part of the problem is that when you sit with the private sector, you'll find that these private sector people would usually say that it is one-off when placements are around, the deans and professors will come, and after everything happens, then everybody seems to forget us. So kindly don't link things to placements, and therefore there is a whole rationale around how do you really find a ground to engage with the businesses on a long-term, sustainable, not one-off manner. I mean, that is something that is very, very important. The third part of the problem is where businesses say that when we want these B schools and universities and academic institutions to reflect what we want into their course curriculum and what they teach, they say that is precisely missing. So there are several other problems which I could probably go on to state, but I think these are the part of the problems, and these are the 3 problems which usually haunt the businesses when they think in terms of engaging with the academia, and this is all over. And therefore, if you were to look at what some of the forward-looking academic institutions have been doing, for instance, lately, and I remember only one name, and there are several others, but I would like to take only one name where I go and spend quite some time, and this is ISB. ISB model is built around a very critical, seamless interface between the leaders in academic institutions and those who are outside it, which means that they're a part of the business. And this model has been not only successful, Because I personally believe a model is successful only when it is accepted by the market very well. If you fail in the market, your model is either dubious or fraudulent, or you have not been able to succeed. And this is the one model which I have personally seen to be thriving, regardless of the fact that the regulators have not even cared to recognize this particular business school. But they have not cared for them. And I remember when ISB Hyderabad was set up, Rajat Gupta, who has been in some problem of late, said in one of the advisory board meeting that our whole focus will be on a model which seamlessly integrates market with academia, and there is nothing else which is going to make us succeed the way we are planning to go out. Regulator and ISB issue has remained, and now we are going to see some thinking within the regulators where you will see what really comes out of it. Some time away, but I'm very sure that whatever solution is going to be found out by everybody else is going to suit everyone. Now, if those are the difficulties and challenges and possibilities, what is it which we need to be doing together? Global Compact just finished a report which has been done by UN Global Compact and the Accenture, and this is thus far the largest sustainability report of the CEOs, where it has interviewed 1,000 CEOs, 77 interviews have been conducted face on face, and 10 of them are from India. And it also talks about the convergence between government, NGOs, businesses, and very, very significantly talks about how can academic institutions play the role of being the breeding ground for our future leaders. And this is where I believe the UN Global Compact believes that the PRME is one of the very significant tools which could probably help the business schools, universities, and academia not only teach a course or maybe a non-credit or credit course on C. Thank you very much.
Sure. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm using this mic because I don't have much to preach there from podium. Let me tell you the background which I'm here. 2 days back, my director called me and said that we have a bad news. Dr. Gopal could not catch his flight, and you have to go live on that panel discussion. I mean, you have to follow your director's instruction. But then I also got the news that he's going to send some messages on a box and video. So, but following responsible management practice, she said that, no, you are going live, and even if the message is there. So, I have got quick 3 points to make here. And these points are that how do we look at the future? The future 10 years, 15 years, maybe we can look 2050, because all projections you make, you know, you can be correct or incorrect and nobody knows. Nobody can make you accountable for that. So I looked at the book written by Jeffrey Sachs, who has been advisor to the United Nations Secretary General, and he wrote a great book called Commonwealth. And I looked at that what the world looks like in 2050. Can we sustain this? Can we sustain with this kind of economic activity? Can we sustain this with this kind of resources which we are using, with the kind of technology which we have? And if you look at that, if we go to the next slide, so if we look at what the world looks like from right now, you have got 7 billion people in this crowded planet right now, currently. And if you go next 20, 30 years, you know, you will have another 2.3. I'm taking a very medium level projection from UN, you know, population funds projection. The maximum is 10.2, minimum is 8, so I'm taking a middle path, and it's 9.2. And most of this population surge will happen in the poorest part of the world, in Asia and Africa, because the developed countries have already stabilized their population and their population growth. So this is one. And then you have a problem that given the global economic growth rate is happening with 2.5% or 2%, whatever you can call, next 30 years, your economic output is going to be double. That's a very, very bare minimum on that. And right now, if you look at the global GDP, the figures can be, a lot of economists are there in this audience, but don't catch me on these figures. Figures are rough figures, obviously. And from $70 trillion of global GDP or global economic output, it's going to be somewhere about $130 trillion output on that. So this is the second part of that. But can we really achieve this kind of a growth with the same set of resources? And that's where he goes on giving the two equations on that. The equations is that it's unsustainable. Equation is that it's unsustainable in terms of the kind of technology we have, the kind of resources we have. So what is that? How do we, what is the way forward? And we will go to the next slide, and if you look at the next slide, and is that the first is this I equivalent to P into A into T, and I is human impact on environment, P is total population, A is income per person, and T is the level of technology. This is the current figure. And if we are following this, and the prediction is, and I take his prediction seriously, we are going to be doomed. It's a collapse. But then there is another equation, and that's where I think prime responsible management and most of the corporations, if they follow, and if we can get that kind of practice, the social acceptance, global acceptance, he says that level of technology is S. So here is that I equivalent to P into A divided by S, sustainable technology and management practices. The technologies which are not going to create problems on the human impact on environment. And there are a lot of, say for example, one way of agriculture is that you use maximum amount of fertilizer, maximum amount of water and things like that. But the other way is that you can go for organic fertilizer, you can go for drip irrigation, and you can use minimum amount of sustainable, inputs for raising agriculture production. In many of the ways, if you look at the kind of technologies which we have been able to develop in the last 20 years, particularly if you look at telecommunication technology, 6 billion people are using telecommunication for information, for communication. That's, I think, the great achievement. But can we sustain it? I think when we are looking at the prime responsible management engaging corporations, we should be looking at that kind of second equation, that are we doing sustainable management practices? Is our packaging sustainable? Is our product sustainable? Are we really concerned about the kind of things which we do to make profit? The profit is not a dirty word, but profit has to be sustainable in that sense. I think there was a question in a previous session that should be sustainable or survival. I think sustainability is our survival. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for a crisp but insightful presentation. Now I would request Mr. Jonas to kindly sum up this session, and after which we would be inviting questions from audience.
I wasn't briefed on that until the very beginning of the session, so I was taking some notes, but I think it's rather hard, of course, to summarize right now, because I think you've heard, what the speakers were talking about. I think what we heard were really kind of, in the beginning, some good examples from companies, both from India, but also from outside India on their CSR strategies. And then I think tying that into what Puran was talking about here, both with regards to, in general, the Global Compact, but I think more practically what companies are doing here, I found that very interesting. And I think especially, Puran, your invitation to think with us how we can build on the ongoing work that Global Compact is undertaking here in India. I think this was a very important point you were making. Then from Gopal, we heard from you also a lot of interesting points. I won't go now through all of the individual points that you were making here. But I think overall, I think there is, when I hear all the different speakers with your points, quite a lot of interesting insights here, both from the academic but also from the practical side that we can delve further into. And I think also tomorrow, throughout the 2 days, and tomorrow and the day afterwards in the conference, we will hear more, also more from people from the corporate sector with regards to this question of how business school education can learn from these individual examples from corporations which are putting emphasis on corporate sustainability practices. So I'm looking forward to the coming sessions, and I think I don't want to give more of a summary here right now of what we've heard, because I think the speakers itself were so clear in what their points were. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. The house is open for questions. Yes, please. Okay. That's it.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Ruchi, and I have a question from my own personal experience that I've been associated with 2 major corporates, Walmart and American Express. So I see there are 2 major challenges that we are facing in this corporate world, and I would also say polity now, because uprising of Aam Aadmi Party. So one is the implementation of the principle of sustainability in the corporates, where we see we have easy routes to success, where we see easy alternatives available for students, for freshers who get into corporate, who get into the practical world outside. So one major challenge that we face is the attitude of the students. The corporates are working really hard. They're working diligently on their CSR activities, on their ethics, and they have different departments designed for that, ethics and CSR. Corporate affairs, corporate social responsibility. We also see various B schools working really hard on the students, on their attitude, on the implementation of the principle of sustainability, ethics, and values that we spoke about, 5 C's, 5 values that we need students to inculcate. How do we address 2 major challenges? One is the attitude of the students. Second, the gap of expectation that we have, that we face as a problem, the expectation of a corporate from a B school. How a student should perform in a corporate, how students should be sustainable, how should a student be ethical when it comes to the practical exposure to the world outside.
I would like to answer this question. You know, the courses like sustainability and CSR, etc., have been introduced in B schools not in the recent past, but for several years now. Now, a B school makes an MBA, it also creates a CEO. That is the fundamental difference that is happening today. So when a fresher from any institute enters a corporate, he gets immersed into a program of CSR and sustainability, where he will have no choice but to use all the knowledge that he has acquired in the B school into this is what's happening today. Now, the 2 examples I gave, they're all from very youngsters, you know, who are from absolutely fresh out of B schools, who only think of sustainability and CSR today, because the entire organization thinks like that. So he has no choice. So there is no special job for a person with a CSR degree or with a sustainability degree unless and until he works for an NGO. But they will get immersed into the program as a whole. So it's actually not a dilemma, but it's really going to happen. A lot of changes are happening today in the corporate world, and everybody's become very, very aware of it.
Can I quickly comment? Because you know what really happens is that, I mean, Global Compact globally has more than 10,000 corporations. In India, we have roughly about 172, and these are some of the finest, fattest, a lot of visibility, and a lot of contribution that they really make to the economy and the growth and the development of the economy as such. When I interact with these senior people, because one of the good things that you get to do at good places like the UN Global Compact is that you never meet with anybody who has failed in his life. You meet with good people, CMDs, CEOs. The complaint from everybody has been that the curriculum, the course, the orientation that the B schools provide, many and majority of the B schools, not everyone, is falling short of the expectations which the corporates are looking forward to. And in one case, I mean, the CEO of Paranjapay is a very good friend of mine. He has now left Unilever and gone away. He told in one of the meetings, which was convened by ISB Hyderabad, that you have to relook at the whole orientation, what you teach. Those who come to teach, who are they? And everybody was hanging their head in shame, and people accepted what he said. And you will not believe, you go to see what ISB taught until about 2010 and what they've been teaching now. The second part of the story is that there is something very unique, which is marketplace. I mean, you have three things which are very important, which is workplace, marketplace, and community. If you are not up to the mark, you will simply eject. It is like a CD that you insert into your, if it is not good enough, it is going to come out. So what is really going to happen is that there is a market, there's a community, and there's a workplace. If you're not up to the mark, you are going to be ejected. Third thing, which is the final one from my side, is that there has to be a new way of thinking about what sustainability is, what CSR is, how do you really orient yourself in order to be able to contribute, because corporates don't hire everybody, isn't it? There are several people who come for the interviews, and I can tell you, as one of the directors of the Times of India until I joined Global Compact, I found it very hard to find two good people after interviewing 500 candidates. So this is the kind of quality which is being churned out, and there's a market which will decide who wins the race. And if you really have to win the race, then you have to jolly well fix your problems, get good people, and this is where I keep on telling academic institutions that your faculty are, I respect, because I was taught by some of the finest professors. I respect the faculty, but you also need to bring thoughts from outside. Get people from outside who, I mean, I don't know. I mean, people might say, I call this person and that person. But the fact of the matter is that it is not something that has been happening. And we need to orient ourselves, the B schools and academic institutions, to look at this spirit, to look at the value, and transfer it to our students, because I have personally felt and believed academic institutions must be the breeding ground for preparing students, not only for 5 years or 10 years, but something which is long-term, and they go on to corporates or wherever they go. They inculcate that sense at the academic institution and pass it on to everybody else after going out and passing out. Your degree is the starting point. Never think you have got an MBA degree or postgraduate diploma and everything is done. You will still need to go out and prove yourself. And this is not happening, and that is the point of worry, which many corporates are beginning to feel. And they say it's very hard to find people at the entry level, which is a very, very sorry state of affairs, and we as academic institutions need to fix our problems and ensure that we prepare our students in a manner who are accepted and are acceptable to the world outside.
As we are running short of time, we can have one last question from the audience.
Shall I? Well, at the cost of being a little sarcastic, I would say that we are perhaps stealing the resources of our future generation if we do not understand the meaning of sustainability. If that be so, my point is towards what Professor Pandey has referred to, that is engaging the corporate sector. Corporate sector would not understand unless you tell them what you have for them in. And for them, you can only convince them if you say that, friends, if you conserve, here is incentive. If you do not, then here is negative motivation in terms of punishment. And when we say that it is incentive, that is in terms of saving water, they know that their bill will be lower. If you say that if you save power, they know their expenditure will be lower. If you say that you damn care about the safety of your people, then you tell them that you might as well pay in terms of compensation and loss of goodwill in the public towards your brand, that is in terms of losing limbs and lives of your men. Now, finally, to quote my own example, my organization was worried. A large number of accidents were taking place. We were the utility services organization, that is provision of water supply and electric supply. Quite often, we faced the problem of accidents because of chlorine leakage at our water supply installation, and due to storms, heavy storms, we found that a power supply getting disrupted. At night, the operators would go and they would just meet with some accident. Next day morning, only dead body. Or even our vehicle drivers in high altitude areas, while driving, the vehicle will go down. So every now and then we would find accidents and accidents only. A simple method what Professor Sengupta had suggested, we adopted. At the main gate, we wrote one sentence.
Mr. Chaubey, could you be specific in your question? I still not understand what you were trying to ask. Or are you sharing some opinion?
Well, I thought probably to share my own experience. That is, the accidents we could cut down by having a
We could possibly
sentence.
do it. We are having half an hour coffee break. Maybe we can do it over there. Yeah.
Right, fair enough, sir.
Okay. I would like to respond to the question that the lady asked there. We all know Vedanta with London School of Economics as British Uni Scholar. And there were two NGOs who were upping the ante on Vedanta, saying, bad company, doesn't take care of anything, they're milking the resources, etc., etc. And they upped the ante on Vedanta so much. And it was being done by two international civil society institutions, namely the Greenpeace and Amnesty International in the UK. And that was a time, Jonas, when a very good friend of mine who was director at the UN Millennium Development Goals Office, Salil, he had quit UN and came to head Amnesty International in the UK. He's a pass out of IIM Bangalore, very fine guy, started his career with an NGO and kind of went up very high, and the Greenpeace. You will not believe what happened after 2 years of sustained advocacy and the campaign by these two NGOs. The Church of England, which owned 26% equity in Vedanta, came out and decided to withdraw. Vedanta lost 26% of the equity in Vedanta, which meant they lost about $2 billion immediately. And they said, we are going to pull the plug on every other shareholder and investors to ensure that Vedanta kind of fixes its. What happens is, and I'm just going to say it at the cost of being repetitive, there's a marketplace which will not let you go if you are not doing the right thing the right way. And therefore, We have to look at marketplace, which is the deciding factor. And I can tell you, if you compare between Tata's and Vedanta, Tata's will pay you 40% of what Vedanta would pay you for the similar role as a position. But people still say Tatas are better. So there is a marketplace. Then there is a workplace where you will not get you will not really get good people to work with you. And community will always withdraw the social license for you to operate. So what happens is sustainability is nothing but bringing these three elements together and do a thing in a manner which gets duly recognized by all these three very critical components, which also, in other words, are the shareholders or the stakeholders of a business. So gone are the days when businesses used to make money and increase the shareholders' value. Money has lost its status as a commodity. It is gone. And corporates know if you chase money, you're not really going to get it. But if you chase planet and the people, the money is going to follow you very quickly. So I think it is all about the options in life and what you want to do and how you want to be seen around by everybody else. And good companies do it well, and others fix it sometimes they don't, and they just kind of, what Professor said some time back, that several companies in the top Fortune 500 kind of went away simply because they could not conduct their behavior in a responsible manner. And I think this is what, in a very simply put manner, is the sustainability, and how do you really get viewed as by all these three stakeholders. And I think this is what many companies have begun to realize and started fixing their nuts and bolts so that they don't really become late and lose a very sizable business in a fast globalizing world. You are no longer doing everything here. You are no longer known by the people here. Anything good that you do is known to everybody outside, and if you do anything bad, the same way.
Thank you, Mr. Pandey. Mr. George, you have a question?
Maybe this is how you feel, but if you go to, the latest trend is, and without saying it, a global compact does not really accept every company within its fold. And there were several companies in India who were proposed to become the member of the global compact, but where? So maybe you think this way, but if you really look at how they have been seen by everybody else, not by one section, so to say, but also by everybody else, and within the family also. One brother is seen in a better light, another one is finding his feet very hard on the ground now. So don't really look at the companies from outside. I will tell you another fact, and you will be probably standing up from your chair. There are 4 companies in India who account for 85% of NPAs of 3 banks. And there is no guarantee that these banks are going to survive for a very, very long time unless they fix their nuts and bolts together. I'm not really going to name those companies. 4 companies in India account for 85% of NPA in 4 very large banks. And you will know it sooner than later what happens to them.
Thank you, Mr. Pandey. I think since we are now running short of time, I would like to convey my sincere thanks to all the panelists and all members of the audience. And we would now request all of you to please join us for high tea.
Thank you all for sharing insightful knowledge with us today. Proceedings for the day now come to an end. On behalf of IILM, we thank you all for attending this PRME meet. Tomorrow's session will begin sharp at 10 a.m. I request all the attendees to be present 15 minutes before the session and be seated by 9:45 a.m. There's an arrangement for tea in the back lawns. I request the attendees to proceed to the back lawns. You can use this gate and also the back gate. Back lawns is this side. So there's an arrangement for tea here. Thank you.